The following podcast may contain adult language and an abundance of salt. So get ready, nerds, because we're talking Masters of the Universe Revelations. Welcome and thank you for joining us on this edition of the Coronavirus Salty Nerd Podcast. We are doing things a little bit differently this week, but we will do our best to provide you with the high-quality entertainment that you always expect. Today, I am joined by my fantastic panel of nerds, starting with the Barbarian Space Viking, Matt Vader 74. Welcome, sir.
Oh, sorry.
Come on, man. I was like, is he frozen?
I thought that too.
I was looking at porn. We're at home, right?
So, put some pants on, Vader. God damn it.
Doesn't have any pants on. Confirmed. No pants.
No pants.
You're doing with that wasn't that U.S. Senator or something like that jacking off on a Zoom meeting?
Hey, whoa.
No, that's not good. That was a CNN
far.
doctor, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Was it Fauci?
No.
Oh, boy. I'm also joined by the ambassador of estrogen, Juju.
Hello.
Welcome. How are you doing?
I come to you live from a house of ill repute.
There has been a contamination in the studio.
Got a big old red letter nailed to their front door. Condemned.
Condemned, yeah.
Oh, man. And last but not least, producer of the show and the hardest working nerd I know, Matthew Kadish. Welcome, sir.
So for those of you wondering why we've switched up our format, because we usually do everyone in studio live, one of the Kadish household tested positive for coronavirus, and we are quarantining, and it just so happened that our recording day is in the middle of our quarantine.
Yeah.
But Jude and I are both fine. We're both vaccinated, and so we're just kind of like wait and see. We didn't want to risk infecting anyone else, so we asked the guys to call in remotely today, and so we're going to be doing this week's shows a little bit differently, but hopefully it's not too big of a difference. Like, we'll still have the fun, witty banter, for the Salty Nerd Podcast.
I think we'll be just fine. All right, guys.
Sorry, I was just going to say, at some point today, you may see the little guy come down if he needs something.
From his fortress of solitude.
Yeah.
It's like, Mom, I need more pirate hooch.
Want some Hot Pockets?
Mom, I need more internet.
Yeah.
Why is there no Bacardi in my Capri Sun?
All right, guys, before we dive into this TV show, on the newest TV show on Netflix, the He-Man Masters of the Universe, we're going to get into deep spoilers. So if you haven't seen it, make sure you go watch the show first and then come back and you check out our review. Before we do, though, we're going to hear a quick word from some sponsors. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. All right, guys, if you would like to support this podcast and you love what we do, you're subscribed, you like all of our videos, go to saltynerdclub.com. There you can find our Patreon page, and you can get access to all kinds of really cool, exclusive behind-the-scenes photos and exclusive podcasts, blooper reels, and you get exclusive access to our Discord server for patrons only, where you get to chat with all the other club members, talk movies and nerd stuff, and you can also get some exclusive access to watch parties. And you get to see me edit some of our videos. I do an editing bay feature on that one too. So saltynerdclub.com. Help support the podcast. Become a Patreon. All right, guys, let's dive into Masters of the Universe Revelation. Mr. Kadish, take it away, sir.
All right. So Masters of the Universe Revelation, the synopsis is: a radical return to Eternia. Revelation is a direct sequel series to the classic era of Masters of the Universe. Featuring fan favorites He-Man, Orko, Cringer, and Man-at-Arms, the story pits our heroic warriors and guardians of Castle Grayskull against Skeletor, Evil Lyn, Beastman, and the vile legions of Snake Mountain. But after a ferocious final battle, which forever fractures Eternia, it's up to Teela to solve the mystery of the missing Sword of Power in a race against time to prevent the end of the universe. Her journey will uncover the secrets of Grayskull at last. This is the epic He-Man and Masters of the Universe saga that fans have waited 35 years to see, supposedly.
I was just going to say, no, I don't think so.
We're going to get started here. I've got an episode-by-episode synopsis, so we'll go through each episode. But I just wanted to get everyone's overall impressions of the series. So, Alex, why don't we find out what you thought of it?
Okay, so real quick, full disclosure, I'm not going to pretend like I know anything about this TV show. It's before my time as far as the cartoon goes, the original cartoon. I never watched it. I think the extent of my knowledge about He-Man extends to about a meme of Skeletor going, ah. Like, that's all I know about this series.
It's the best meme ever.
It's the best meme ever. So, like, going into this, I had zero knowledge, and it was a blank slate for me. So I just wanted to see what they had to offer. And the things that I liked, animation was great. Fight scenes were very interesting. Some of the characters were fascinating. Very strange, a lot stranger than I expected it to be. Like, I thought this was more of like a swords and shield, ancient times type cartoon, but it turns out there's like techno stuff and like robots and all kinds of crazy. Like, I wasn't expecting that, so that was a pleasant surprise. It was pretty cool. But in the story, the whole quest thing, trying to find the two shards of the sword of power, very interesting stuff. I like that. But there was a glaring problem with it, and the character that I was expecting to see was like non-existent for 90% of this 5-episode series. So I was disappointed with that, and I had a hard time looking past some of the more blatant agenda-driven nods that were there. It kind of just made me cringe for a lot of it. But those are my general thoughts. Who do you want to go next? Vader, do you want to go next? You're a longtime fan, right?
No.
No?
No. This stuff, He-Man was a little not. I didn't watch a lot of. I watched it, but I never cared about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What I don't really remember how old I was. I didn't even look up when this stuff was out. I want to think it was in the late 80s. Or am I wrong?
The cartoon was 83, and the movie I think was 87.
Okay, so I was like in my mid-teens when that came out, and I wasn't watching a lot of after-school cartoons. You know what I mean? Which is what this was. But I did catch it. I knew about it. I didn't buy the weirdly over-muscled action figures and stuff. And I always thought there was something strange and a little bit off about the whole He-Man world. So it wasn't really my thing. That being said, I don't know what I can add to what you said. I mean, it was well animated, but it's just it's not there. It's not good, and I completely understand why people are upset about this thing with the whole Teela and friends and their little side adventure story that we got for the first half of this series.
That's a question I had.
They should have dumped the whole thing at once. You know, I'm not a big binge fan, but in a case like this, they needed to release all 10 episodes so we can have more context to the front end of, which is what we got. So, because as it is right now, it's crap. It's super muscly Teela with her SJW shaved haircut and her girlfriend out doing Teela things, and just not good. I'm not into it. So they dropped the ball pretty hard.
Okay. Jude, I know you're not huge into animation cartoons and stuff, but what are your general thoughts on this show?
So, I feel like I don't know what this is for. Like, I feel like this was just like a smoking weed all night fever dream that Kevin Smith came up with. And he was like, oh yeah, 40-year-old nerds are going to love this shit.
Mm-hmm.
But, and you know, I'm not a fan of adult animation. So, that being said, I feel like this is something, if they were going to reboot, they should have rebooted it for children. It should have been a children's cartoon again. And that would have been something exciting for the parents to be like, oh my gosh, I used to watch this when I was your age. And like that kind of a thing. But they didn't do that. They put this out on, what was it, on Netflix?
Mm-hmm.
On Netflix, they gave us 6 episodes for the adult nerds to like go bananas over. And it also wasn't good for like me. It wasn't adult. It was just a cartoon that I was supposed to get super excited about. And like, exactly like you said, we got all done with it. And I was like, so, where's He-Man?
Yep.
Like it's, I should have known when it wasn't called He-Man and the Masters of the Universe that it wasn't going to feature He-Man, but that's what we all show up for. We don't show up for Teela. I think that Sarah Michelle Gellar did a great job voicing her. And once I found out that like the character behind my favorite character of all time was behind that character, I was more invested in it. But like another couple of episodes went by and I was just like, yeah, I don't care and I don't want it.
Hmm.
See,
All right.
that's interesting. That's interesting that you liked her voice work, because I did not. I thought most of the voice work in this thing felt off to me. Like the voices didn't match a lot of the characters that they were supposed to be voicing.
Oh, you don't like
No,
Sir Davos as Master of War or something? Or...
no, not really.
Man at
no?
Arms.
Man
Man
at
at
Arms,
Arms?
but he was okay. But like I didn't like He-Man. I didn't like Teela. I especially didn't like Evil Lynn
Oh, that
being
was
played by Circe.
Lena
It
Headey.
just-
Lena Headey?
But all I saw was Lena Headey. I didn't see Evil Lynn.
Yeah. Once I realized that was Lena
You
Headey, that's all I could see too.
Yeah, it just I heard the Joker coming out of Skeletor's mouth.
Ah, but my repeated failures were but a bridge to my success.
Oh, 100%.
I know Mark Hamill does a lot of voiceover work, but he was just doing Joker. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just seemed off as far as that kind of stuff goes. Now the animation style and everything it was very Japanese, which is cool. I'm okay. It was like a hybrid style kind of mix of the old cartoon mixed with modern kind of anime, whatever they call it, style. And it was fine. I got into it, but it just seemed off. If they're gonna update something, update it like they did with the one that came out 10 years ago or whatever it was. Well, I don't remember how long ago it was, but at least it was like hyper stylized and kind of cool and adult, but that's that. So
All right, so Kadish, you I was very surprised to see your thread on Twitter about this show. You definitely subverted my expectations. So why don't you tell us your general thoughts on this?
I got one more thing to say before Kadish goes.
Go ahead, bud.
And it's about the same thing. I was like riding this wave of just pure anger towards this thing. And then I got to thinking to myself, after reading Kadish's long ass book, that it was too long to read, but I read it anyway. It kind of calmed me down a little bit. It kind of brought me back down to earth, and it made me think about reasons why I didn't like this thing, other than Teela's haircut. So yeah, it was a good thread. But anyway, carry on, Matt. I'm sorry.
Yeah, take it away, Kadish.
All right. So out of all the people here, I'm just going to give a quick background on my He-Man experience, because I was the demographic for the show. I went and saw Masters of the Universe, the movie, for my 9th birthday. That was my big party. Was I got to go see Masters of the Universe in the theater when I turned 9. And so like I had grown up like a He-Man fan. It started off when my dad was stationed in Germany, and I have this very vivid memory, and this is like pre-kindergarten me. And I don't remember anything from that time period except like some weird He-Man memories, where when we first got to Germany, like we were basically stationed in a hotel, and it was like a couple days before Christmas, and we didn't have, like Santa wasn't coming because we didn't have like a whole lot of like time to buy, especially American toys. And my dad was able to pick up the Hawkman. I forget his name, but he's like this guy with like, he looks like a hawk. He's got wings on his arms. He-Man figure for me at like the base, commissary or something like that. And that was like my toy for Christmas that year. And from that point on, like I'd watch He-Man because we'd have people in the States send videotapes of American cartoons to us so that, I'd understand what was being said. And it was all He-Man, and I'd get a bunch of toys while we were in Germany, and they all came with like comic books. And so I'd read the comic books. And when we got back to the States, I'd be able to watch He-Man. I had a huge collection of He-Man toys. And so like I grew up on He-Man. Like He-Man was my jam. Like I had like I don't even know what you call that thing, like the little chest armor costume, and like the power swords. And I'd run around hitting my brothers with the swords and stuff. So like I was a He-Man kid, and I'm the 40-year-old nerd that Jude referenced and talking about this thing that, that the show is made for, basically. And like all you guys, I was, kind of ready to hate this show when I started watching it because, for months we'd heard these rumors about how like it wasn't He-Man show, like Teela had been put forward like kind of front and center. And so I was expecting the worst when I sat down to watch this. And as I was watching it, I just got all these nostalgia throwbacks that just made me very happy while I was watching this. Now, don't get me wrong, there are problems with this show. But as a kid who grew up on He-Man, who had all the toys and who, cosplayed as He-Man growing up and stuff like that, this show hit all the right notes for me. Like every time a character would show up, be like, I had that toy.
It was like every 4 seconds.
But they really kind of captured the essence of the characters from the original cartoon as well. At least, not Teela, but like all the supporting characters and all the bad guys and stuff like that. And in addition to that, I really love the animation style. I thought that the voice acting, I totally disagree with Vader. I think that they cast this stuff perfectly. All the voices fit the characters, in my opinion. Like you had Jason Mewes as Stinkor, and when he showed up, I told Jude, I was like, that toy actually did stink. Like they made it so like the toy stunk really bad. Moss Man also stunk. Funny enough. But you also had I thought Leon Cunningham as the Man-at-Arms was the perfect casting for that. I thought that Lena Headey and Griffin Newman, the guy who played Arthur in The Tick, he was great as Orko. He did that without any voice modulation, which in the original series, you had one guy doing like 12 different voices. And so like they just added modulators to his voice for when he did that character. And it's kind of funny because as we were watching the show, like I kept thinking like, where do I know that voice from? Like you had Kevin Conroy as Merman, Alicia Silverstone as Queen Marlena, Justin Long as Roboto, just like a real stellar like celebrity voice cast. And when I was watching this, I agree with you guys. They should have released all 10 episodes because I kind of saw what they were going for. Like, I do agree that He-Man was kind of absent from the first 5 episodes, even though he's in every episode in some form or another. The specter of He-Man, because in the first episode, he makes this big sacrifice where he basically, quote unquote, dies. And he's absent for the next 5 episodes in terms of like being an active character in the story. But his presence is always felt there, especially in terms of Teela, because, growing up, Teela was the kind of He-Man's girlfriend, but she never knew his true identity. And so it was like this weird thing where Prince Adam was in love with Teela, Teela was in love with He-Man, but they could never truly be together because they weren't actually in love with the actual person.
It's so Superman and Lois Lane.
It kind of is, yeah. It's the same trope. So like I saw what they were doing with this, where it was Teela's hero's journey. And this kind of goes back to the first season of He-Man, where basically, I think it's in episode 6, it's called Teela's Quest. And it was written by Paul Dini, the guy behind the Batman animated series, which is kind of funny because the original He-Man like cartoon had Paul Dini and J. Michael Straczynski, 2 amazing writers involved in it, which, looking back, the writing is so just kind of simple that you don't think, oh, there are great writers behind the show, but there really are. And the whole like fantasy melded with science fiction thing, like I always love that. But Teela's Quest, the 6th episode, it kind of it was the first time that we got to see Teela's background, where she was adopted by Man-at-Arms. And it was revealed in that episode that she is the daughter of the Sorceress of Grayskull. And when she finds this out, the sorceress erases it from her mind. And so going forward, she never knew who her true parents were. But her destiny has always been to eventually become the protector of Grayskull, basically the sorceress's position. And so when I saw what they were doing, where she was like, kind of rejecting magic and kind of going off on her own, rejecting her kind of surrogate family and stuff like that, I was like, okay, so they're kind of following the traditional hero's journey with her. I was still kind of unhappy that He-Man wasn't front and center, but I understood why they wanted to pull back from him, because they really took these first 5 episodes to set up the supporting cast of He-Man in ways that we never got before. Like we got backstory on Orko, we got some sympathy for Evil Lyn. Like there was a lot of stuff there where if Skeletor and He-Man were in the story, they would have kind of sucked out all the oxygen from that. The focus kind of would have been on them. So I can understand why they did it. That doesn't necessarily mean I agree with them doing it.
Yeah. If I can jump in real quick, that sounds very familiar to when J.J. Abrams was like, I don't want to put Luke Skywalker in my movie because he'll suck the energy away from all the other characters. It's like, bro, there's a reason why we're here.
Yeah.
Like, I think there's a way you can do both. You can both build up the supporting cast while not erasing the main character completely.
So in that situation, though, J.J. Abrams was sacrificing established characters for new characters. In this situation, it's all established characters. It's just characters that we've never gotten a lot of insight into. So, you know, in not seeing the back five of this season, apparently, according to Kevin Smith, whether or not you want to believe him, the final 5 episodes are all very He-Man centric. It's all about He-Man. So I can see how, like, if the overarching hero's journey in this 10 episode series is Teela's quest, where she eventually becomes the Sorceress of Grayskull, and she has to team up with He-Man to grant him the power to defeat the skeleton. They call him Skelegod in the show after he gets the power of Grayskull. So, like, you know, I can see why they're setting it up this way, where the first 5 episodes were very Teela-centric. And but again, like, whether or not you like that or like the choices that Kevin Smith made in this, there is thought that's being put into this story. And if you look at the episodes individually within like an overarching plot structure, they hit all the right marks for the hero's journey mythos.
Mm-hmm.
So I can kind of guess where they're going with it. And I think that in the back 5 episodes, if we were to see those, a lot of people's criticisms of the show would probably get addressed.
Okay. So as far as the writing goes, I actually do agree with you. I think the story itself works on paper. I like the quest. I like the idea that, you know, if you want to go with the hero's journey with Teela and build her up, she's going to become the sorceress of Grayskull. I get it. On paper, that sounds fine. What my biggest issue was, and what detracted from the show for me, was the subtext of all the modern Hollywood isms that happened in these new TV shows, where, like, every chance they got, they kind of took a shot at He-Man. Like, they would make fun of him for saying his one-liners, but then they would turn around and do their own types of one-liners. There was like Teela. I can understand to a certain extent that Teela would be upset that somebody got lied to her, but the whole scene where she goes off on the king and queen who just lost their son, and she's like, I don't care what you guys think, I have to deal with this, and she runs off, and like, she just comes off as kind of like a spoiled brat, and it makes her, as somebody who doesn't know who she is and didn't grow up with her, it makes her very unlikable. And that's a bad start to a 5 episode thing, where I'm like, I don't like this chick, she's already annoying me, and now I got to watch her for the next 5 episodes just be mean to everybody because she got somebody lied to her once. And then there's multiple scenes where like Everlyn, when she was talking about Grayskull, she's like, I could never reach my true potential because the man was keeping me down, and I was just focused on his goals and not my own. I was just kind of, it's just very cringy.
It's very cringy,
very blunt, and there's no subtlety to it. Like, those messages are fine if you want to put them in there, but have some kind of, you know, nuance to it or something like that. It was very just beating me over the head with it the whole time. And it took me out of the parts of the show that I did like. I liked that they went down to hell and was like going on this quest and they had to face their fears. I liked that stuff. It was really cool, but I kept getting beat over the head with this messaging, and it took me out of the show. And for somebody who is not familiar with these characters, it made it difficult for me to kind of get on board and enjoy what I was watching.
And on top of the messaging, it was just, they enforced it with the character design, with the haircut and with the extra muscular look to her. They made her look like a dude. They made all the women in this thing look like dudes to me, for the most part, with the extra muscles and stuff. If you go online, you can see places where people just like literally chopped the tops of one of their heads off, a Teela, and shaved her head, and she looks like a guy. There's nothing feminine about these characters in this show anymore. It's annoying because, if you go back to the old cartoon, they're girls. There's guys and there's girls. And the way they're doing it now, it's like they're trying to, I don't know how to explain the messaging behind it, but it's weird. It's weird to me. I don't know what else to say.
Well,
So.
I kind of agree with you, but I did want to bring up just play devil's advocate. If you look proportionately, if you look at the male characters, they are freaking huge.
Yeah.
Behemoths.
That's because this was a show for little boys.
In proportion.
This was a show for boys.
Yes.
Designed to sell boys action figures and toys. This wasn't a show for little girls.
Oh, I agree.
And that doesn't mean, and it doesn't have to be a show for little girls in 2021. It's still a show for boys. It's a show now for 40-something-year-old boys like Matt who wanted to revisit their childhood. That's what this show's is for.
I get that, but that wasn't what my point was going to be. It's just like, if you look proportionately between the male and female characters, if you put He-Man, actual He-Man, right next to Teela, she looks very small stature, very feminine compared to the freaking Hulk master freaking dude. He's giant compared to her. So I'm just saying, like, proportionately in comparison to each other, male versus female characters in this show. Now, if you were to take the female characters out of the show and put it next to like a different type of show that has female characters, yes, they do look very, very masculine. But I was just playing devil's advocate. It was just something I thought of. I'm like, it kind of fits in the context of the TV show, but I do 100% understand where Vader's coming from on that. So Matt, you had some arguments against the messaging in this show. Go ahead and take your stance.
Yeah, I wanted to address that because I feel like that's something that's kind of getting a little bit overblown in a lot of the criticism. So, for instance, Evil Lynn, like when she makes that statement where she was always in Skeletor's shadow and she was never able to reach her full potential because of Skeletor, that's accurate. Like in the original series, like Skeletor was always keeping his minions kind of like subservient to him, and Evil Lynn, was kind of like involved in that. And I actually thought when she made that speech, when she was kind of becoming vulnerable in front of Orko, talking about that, I found it very interesting because I was like, she's not wrong. Like Skeletor, part of him being, the master of evil is that he continuously prevents those around him from ever kind of like breaking out of the mold that he wants them to be in. And so she's always just been his sidekick, his henchman, his apprentice, whatever you want to call it. But he would never allow her to kind of rise up to the point where she could betray him. And it was interesting in the 5th episode where he becomes Skelegod and she basically goes right back into the position that she said that she hated. She kind of joins by his side, and it's one of those things where she's kind of in an abusive relationship with like a really jerky dude.
Or she's just power hungry.
Or that.
But that's because she is in a relationship with a really jerky dude.
Yeah.
Skeletor is the master of the jerkiness.
Yeah, but that goes back to the original cartoon. So like I didn't see that as a messaging. I just saw that as a development of what came before and some insight into a character that we've never gotten before.
I don't need to hear Evil Lynn crying about how the man kept her down in a kid's cartoon.
But this isn't a kid's cartoon.
It's still a cartoon.
It is a cartoon, but like I said, this series is kind of weird in the sense that it's more adult than the original cartoon, but it's not completely adult. Like the writing felt very kind of a callback to the cheesy 80s writing that we got in the original series, which is something that I could appreciate because it made it feel like the original cartoon, but some of the themes that they were dealing with were a lot more mature. And so it was one of those things where like I felt like they were trying to make it so that kids could watch it and still enjoy it, but adults could watch it and get something out of it as well. So it's kind of like it's a weird amalgamation that they're walking this like tightrope between like the kid stuff and the adult stuff.
I feel like that's the thing when you try to like please a bigger audience, you end up not pleasing anyone. You know, like when you're trying to like
I
make sure
agree.
everyone is happy with the finished product, like nobody's happy with it.
But getting back to the messaging aspect of this, like I felt like at the end of the first episode, you know, Teela throws her little hissy fit and she feels like everyone she cared about lied to her. And so she quits her job as the new man at arms for the king and queen and storms off. She hates magic now. She cuts her hair and she's basically a mercenary. She's kind of like a gun for hire at this point. And I can understand why they did it, because within the hero's journey, that's the refusal for action. That's where they refuse the call. The hero refuses the call and they kind of go off and they do their own thing. And then they come back around and they pass the point of no return where they're on their quest. And so like from a storytelling perspective, I understand why they did it, but I don't agree with the way they went about doing it, because it did make Teela come off as kind of like petulant and selfish. And like, I felt like if King Raynor had been the one throwing the hissy fit once he found out that Adam was actually He-Man and he was lied to by his inner circle, if she had quit in solidarity with him kind of exiling her adopted father and all the people that, you know, knew He-Man's secret, then I could see it kind of going forward. But I understand why they did it the way they did. I just didn't agree with the way they went about doing it.
I feel like they wrote her really whiny.
Yeah.
I felt like they should have picked a lane and stuck to it one way or the other.
All right. So the first episode's called The Power of Grayskull. And this episode was kind of the introduction to the story. And it really did feel like a continuation of the original cartoon series. And I felt like it was a lot of fun to kind of see all the characters as they were from the cartoon series before we got to see them being changed. So Vader, what did you think of the very first episode?
I don't know, man. It was just a fun little setup for the rest of the show, I guess. We got introduced to the characters and they killed Adam and we moved on. I mean, I don't know if I'm going to be able to say anything more than that about every show in the series. You know, it's just kind of meh about the whole thing.
All right. Jude, what did you think of the first episode?
I was still on board at that point, and I think I didn't realize who was voicing everyone until like the end of that episode. And then once I found that out, I was like, oh, cool. It's going to make me enjoy the show so much more, but it didn't.
Yeah. So other than the last couple minutes of this episode, I really liked what I was seeing. Like we got to see all the old school He-Man characters come back. Skeletor's evil plot actually worked. We had a very heroic sacrifice from He-Man, where basically he sacrificed his own life for all of creation. It was talk about having the stakes as high as they were. But the ending kind of cheapened it, where Teela basically just came off as like kind of like a whiny brat who couldn't appreciate the sacrifice that He-Man made. And this will come back later on in the series. So the second episode is called The Poison Chalice. And this is kind of picking up with the new Teela. She's got the new haircut. She's got a new partner, and she's working as a mercenary, accepting jobs from different people. And we get to see her kind of like fight Stinkor in this one, which kind of tickled me because that character's always been funny. Voiced by Jason Mewes from Kevin Smith's Silent Bob
his
stuff.
ilk. Yeah.
His I think he has all his friends in this thing, right?
Pretty much. He's even got his daughter.
Yeah, his daughter.
So basically in this episode, we get to go into Snake Mountain and we get to see Teela take on Triclops and a bunch of Skeletor's old crew. And basically now that Skeletor's gone, it's left this power vacuum, which Triclops has kind of risen up to fill. And it's one of those things where basically instead of magic, because magic's been dying off in Eternia since the destruction of the Sword of Power, technology is the new god. And that's the thing that Triclops is kind of worshiping. And he's turning new followers into like these weird, like cyborg hybrid things, kind of like what he is.
It's like the Borg.
Yeah. And it was kind of an interesting thing. And we get to see a flashback of Teela and He-Man kind of like storming Snake Mountain at some point. And like I said before, like all these episodes, He-Man is in them. He's present, whether it be in a flashback or, as like a ghost or something like that. But it's kind of interesting to see like her new experiences juxtaposed with her previous experiences. So, but in this episode, we get like the new Teela. So what did you guys think of the new Teela?
So I don't know if this kind of harkens back to the original cartoon. You'll have to let me know, Kadish. But just to talk about Teela herself, like the whole reveal where she takes the hood off and she's got the freaking haircut and it falls down. And it's supposed to be like this big epic moment about how she's come into her own and she's her new own badass. I thought that was super cringy. In fact, I think her character design was much better when she stormed out of the castle in the first episode and she just took her tiara off and her hair fell down. I was like, she looked like a badass. Yeah. Like, and then the next episode, we get this reveal where she's got half her head shaved. And I'm like, oh, it's 2021. Oh, yeah. Like, it just took me out. It took me out of the show. It didn't make any sense in context of where this universe is taking place. I'm like, is that really a hairstyle that people roll with in that universe? Because that's very like Antifa freaking, 2021. And it took me out of it. And the other thing that kind of made me kind of cringe. And again, if this is something that kind of harkens back to the original TV show, then so be it. I can't criticize it for that. But when what's the robot, the Triclops, is that what his name is?
Yeah, Triclops is like one of the bad guys. He's got like the 3 different eyes.
Yeah. Okay, so when he was doing his like freaking Temple of Doom thing on his little platform, and he was like, "Drink of the motherboard," and I'm like, "Oh, motherboard," because it's a computer. Okay, I get like that kind of stuff. To me is hyper corny. And it kind of made me laugh. But if that's something that like the original show is like, is that more or less what they went with?
That's 100% the original show.
Okay.
Like the original show was very corny.
Okay.
Very
I thought
corny.
so. Yeah. I thought so. So I can't criticize it for that. But as a newcomer coming into this TV show, I was just kind of like rolled my eyes. I'm like, wow, that is some corny ass freaking dialogue. But that's it for, I mean, as far as Teela's design, it just took me out of it. It removed me out of this universe and it put me on Twitter, with a bunch of harpies yelling at me.
Vader?
I don't have anything to add really. It kind of took me out of it as well. The only thing they needed to add to Teela was maybe some purple highlights to her hair, and they would have had the whole thing set up. Tell us about her friend. Where is she from? Andra.
Yeah. So she was a very minor character in the original series. They race swapped her for this one. She was originally white. But she was so insignificant in the original show. I don't really think it mattered all that much. I know that there was some controversy that they were implying that Teela and Andra were like, in a lesbian relationship with one another. Mm-hmm. But Kevin Smith has flat out said like, no, they're friends. They're not in a romantic relationship. They're just, like 2 women who are friends. Okay. So, he's come out and basically just said that outright. But then again, a lot of people don't believe, Kevin Smith. But Jude, what did you think of Teela's kind of masculinization in this episode?
Well, I definitely noticed that obviously she had a new haircut, and I definitely noticed I was like, is she buffer? It didn't really bother me because I was like, well, we've all gotten haircuts, and I had a mohawk one time too. I was trying something. I think what bothers me the most is when I hear, and no offense, you guys, but when I hear dudes nitpicking a woman's haircut and trying to turn it into something that it may or may not be, but just I just feel like there's just so much talk about a woman's haircut, and that's what's making me cringe, not the fact that she had a haircut.
Well, that's because you're a girl.
Oh, fuck you.
It's a fair point, though. I mean, if that kind of stuff doesn't bother you and you hear people complain about it, it's going to be like, oh God, here we go again. I get it. I understand Jude's perspective on this. It's just for me, again, coming into this with a clean slate, not knowing who these characters are. It felt so modern, like in our time and our age, and addressing, this stuff. There was no subtlety to it. And it just kind of like, okay, so this isn't, it didn't allow me to kind of become invested in this world because I kept getting beat over the head with 2021 stuff. So,
yeah, but then again, like Eternia is like a weird mishmash of different time periods. Like it's high fantasy, at the same time it's science fiction. So there's no kind of specific time period it has to be kind of tethered to. But getting to the third episode, which is called The Most Dangerous Man in Eternia, basically we get to see Man-at-Arms come back, and man, is he a badass. I don't think I've ever seen him more badass in the original series, because like he just like he looks like a Ronin, like a masterless samurai, and he's just like kicking butt left and right. And it's kind of interesting to see his reunion with his adopted daughter and him trying to like keep Orko alive. And this is basically the episode where Evelyn and Teela kind of like team up, and Evelyn becomes part of this kind of questing crew. But the most dangerous man in Eternia turns out to be Merman, or at least like I believe that's kind of what they were hinting at. And of course, it's voiced by Batman himself, which was kind of funny. So shout out to Kevin Conroy for that one. But it was cool seeing like Merman come out, because I had the Merman toy growing up.
Of course you did.
Yeah,
of course you did.
Didn't you have all the toys?
I had most of them. I had a big collection.
Man-at-Arms gives me like Gimli vibes.
Maybe probably more Legolas, because like he is a real badass. But
you like that man bun?
Are you saying that Gimli is not a badass?
No, it's just that he's not the one who's like doing somersaults in the air and like shooting 3 guys at once and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I said what I said.
Yeah. So a big portion of this episode had to do with them facing off with Merman. And there was kind of like an interesting moment at the end there where I get the sense that he's going to come back and help them fight against Skeletor, because he was betrayed by Skeletor at some point. It was a good setup for, I think, a payoff that's going to come in the back 5 episodes. But what did you guys think of Merman, Jude?
Oh, okay. I don't know. I don't have the love of this show that you do, and I'm not invested in it. And when I saw a merman, I went, a merman. And that was the extent of what I thought.
Yeah.
All right, Alex.
I will say that I do agree with you that was it Man-at-Arms? What's his name again? Man-at-Arms. He is indeed the most badass character in this show for me. Like when he shows up, every time he shows up on screen, he's kicking somebody's ass, and I loved it. His techniques, the weapons he was using, just how casual he was taking down hundreds of people. I thought that was super awesome. He's definitely my favorite character in this show so far, being new to it. As far as Merman goes, it's more 80s cringe for me. And not in I'm not trying to crap on it in that way, but it just seems very much like it's of its time. It's the 80s. They're like, oh, you traitorous trout and stuff like that. It just made me roll my eyes and kind of laugh. And I'm like, wow, man, the 80s were something special, huh?
they certainly were.
Yeah, but I didn't have a problem with Merman. He was fine. Again, I'm kind of in half the camp of Jude. It's just kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, he's a fish man. I get it. Cool. All right.
Wasn't he supposed to have a fishy voice? Like
I'll use my power over the ocean to bring a tidal wave.
I think that was.
I'll get you, He-Man.
I think that was the way they had it in the original cartoon show, but obviously they changed it for this one.
Well, they should have kept it, because I remember Merman having a fishy, bubbly voice.
I would have,
and maybe it's in my head. I don't know. I need to go back and look, but
I would have loved to have heard Kevin Conroy try to do like a gargly fish voice.
Because yeah.
All right, and at the end of this episode, they actually find the entrance to the underworld, and they use Skeletor's staff head to unlock it. And this is a typical kind of like hero's journey thing, where like they, in Joseph Campbell's original Hero with 1,000 Faces outline, the hero does journey into the underworld. So this is like they're literally following the hero's journey.
Is there any other way to make a movie other than having the hero's journey?
Yeah, there are different ways, but the hero's
There's
journey.
12. That's it.
I feel like I'm just tired of hearing about the hero's journey. You know what I mean? It's just.
Well, that's why you're getting a bunch of villain backstory now. So shut up.
Maybe that's it. It's just,
you're gonna get more Cruella movies if you don't shut it down.
Yeah, but you know, the whole thing about this show is we're getting Teela's hero's journey and Teela's background character, and I think that's part of the crux of the whole thing that people have issues with this thing.
Well, the thing the thing about the hero's journey is that it's the best way to incorporate character development with an interesting plot. And that's why the hero's journeys are always successful, is because you have the most character development with the most interesting way to go about doing that. I mean, it's literally how myths and legends are created in
I get it.
in our modern mythology. So the fourth episode is called Land of the Dead. And this is where basically the Teela's crew goes into the underworld and they have to face their fears. And they're kind of paired off where we get Andra, Roboto, and Beastman are kind of in their own group. Then we get Evil Lyn and Orko in their own thing. And then Teela's on her own, but she faces off with a character that I love the toy for. It was called Scareglow. And it was, the skeleton dude who, when you turn the lights off, you'd see his skeleton glow in the dark. And it was kind of funny watching this episode because Scareglow is voiced by Tony Todd, the Candyman. And he has like all the muscles and stuff, but when he goes into the darkness, his skeleton like glows just like the toy did.
I feel like I remember the commercial for this toy.
Yeah. So it was, that was one of my favorite toys because you could play with him in the dark and you'd see a skeleton and stuff like that. So I was really tickled whenever he was on screen. And plus Tony Todd, perfect choice for his voice. And he's one of those characters, I guess he's the ruler of the underworld. He feeds off of other people's fear. And we get to see all the different characters kind of confront the thing that they're afraid of most in the underworld. And we get hints of Teela's kind of parentage where, she kind of she already knows what her parentage is, but the sorceress had blocked that memory from her. And they kind of touched on that in this episode. So overall, what did you guys think of the Underworld episode, Alec?
This was my favorite episode of the 5. I loved everything about it. The quest going underground felt very much like Lord of the Rings when they went down into the caves in the dwarven tunnels and stuff, and fighting off monsters and stuff. I love that we got a lot of character development by pairing these characters off with one another, and they kind of feed off of each other's perspectives and personalities. I thought Evelyn and Gorgo, is that his name?
Orko.
Hey,
Orko.
Kadish, you're saying her name wrong, man.
Evil
Lyn.
It's Evil Lyn.
I didn't say it wrong. It's Alex who's saying.
I was making fun of him. Evelyn is the old lady at church that makes the little triangle sandwiches. Okay.
Evil Lyn.
I love Evelyn.
I like Evil Lyn. I liked her character development in this episode. I like that she got paired off with the little gremlin dude, Orko. At first, I didn't like him when I first got introduced to him. I was like, oh my gosh, you're some corny freaking 80s cartoon character that I'm not gonna like. But by this episode, I was like, dude, that guy's awesome. I freaking loved him.
Everybody likes Orko, dude.
Yeah.
Even me.
Oh, I'm on board now.
Well, it was funny because we got more backstory for Orko than I remember him ever getting in the original cartoon series.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about this, because in this episode, Orko, quote unquote, dies. And he sacrifices himself fighting Scareglow so that the others can escape into heaven, basically. And one of the interesting things is like a lot of people online have been criticizing, like, oh, they killed off Orko, like this is stupid. But it was interesting. I watched a live stream with Kevin Smith and the guy who does the voice for Orko, the guy from The Tick. And they were talking about how there's a line that Orko says where it's like, return to your shadow, where he's like, go away, demon, go back to your shadow, something like that.
Go back to your shadow!
And it was a direct kind of lift from Gandalf when he's fighting Balrog, where he's like, return to your shadow, beast, or something like that.
You shall not pass.
And so basically they were implying that Orko's kind of development is that, he's always been this wizard who couldn't do magic properly. And in this final moment where he's fighting Scareglow, he finally kind of taps into his power and fulfills like the destiny that his parents had always wanted for him as the Oracle. And, he sacrifices himself in order to save these people. But because of the parallels that they're drawing with Gandalf the Wizard, my guess is they're planning to bring him back in the next 5 episodes at a certain point as like a new, more powerful version of Orko.
It's gonna be Orko the White.
Yeah.
And I'm going to destroy Kevin Smith for just lifting every single trope that he can out of all these shows. He could have at least lifted something interesting off of these for these shows, and challenged death to a game of checkers or something or whatever, like they did in Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, right? I mean, I feel like I've seen this stuff a million other TV shows and movies. It's like, oh, people are going to go to hell or whatever, and they're going to challenge the big bad guy, and then they're going to redeem themselves and get out and carry on with their little quest. It's just, nah, dude. This there's nothing original. There's nothing original going on here. Okay, and Scareglow, is that what you said his name was?
Yeah,
Scareglow. It sounds like he's a DJ for a hair brand company.
Well, you can blame Mattel for that. They're the ones who named these
horrible.
Characters.
That's 80s cringe, bro. That's what this show's all about.
It's horrible.
I don't know. I find it
Scareglow
with stuff that's from the 80s and they move it to the like. I can't blame the show for that. They're just working with what they got. These are the characters' names, so you lean into it and you own it. So I didn't mind that.
Well,
I thought that was kind of funny.
I'll tell you this.
I want to know if Kevin Smith has anything original in his head that doesn't involve being at a mini market at 2:00 in the morning.
I'll tell you this: the way they utilized Scareglow was better than I think I've ever seen him utilized before. Like it was a really interesting kind of take on the character.
It was cool. Like when he was fighting Orko and he's like pushing his way past the rings and he gets right up into his face and Orko does the freaking full power thing. I was in, man. Like I said, this is my favorite episode. I think it's the best one out of the 5, in my opinion. It was the one that I was most invested in. We got the most backstory for the characters. We got to see some cool fights. The only thing I will say when I first saw it happen is when Teela goes off and of course she's on her own. She's like, everybody else is paired up, but Teela gets to go off on her own. At first, that kind of made me cringe. I'm like, oh, of course, she's going to go off and she's going to do her own thing because she's the freaking big, strong lady. But then I was like, if this is what they're going for, this is her story. Typically, in a hero's journey, the hero will be separated from the group and tested on his own merit. So
it was her Cave and Dagobah moment.
Yeah, exactly. So I didn't mind it. Like at first I was kind of irritated, but I didn't mind it after I kind of like let it mull over a little bit. Go ahead, Kadish.
Yeah, I mean it's more hero's journey stuff with her kind of character development. And there's a scene in there where basically she faces off with He-Man, and this is the first time I think she's ever actually fought He-Man, even though it's not really He-Man. But it's kind of like her facing her demons. It's the equivalent of Luke Skywalker fighting Darth Vader and then seeing his face in Vader's helmet and stuff like that. But the Orko thing, I kind of disagree with Vader in the sense that a lot of these tropes, they're tropes for a reason, and that's because they work. So I don't see this as being unoriginal. I just see this as following a formula and doing it with characters that are unique and interesting and that I grew up with. Like I said, in this episode, we got more backstory for Orko than I think we'd ever gotten in the entire run of the original show. So it was cool to see him finally kind of like break out of his, I can't do magic mold and become like a powerful sorcerer at the very end when his friends needed him the most. Because the thing about Orko has always been that he's like the dunce. He's the guy who messes stuff up and his friends have to pick up the slack. And it was nice to see his journey to actually helping his friends as opposed to being a burden on them, which was always kind of like the thing that, kind of weighed on him the most, I think. Jude, what did you think of this episode?
I feel like we are giving a very pick apart review of a fucking cartoon that I don't give a shit about.
I completely agree.
Underworld,
poor-
okay, cool, but it's still a cartoon. I just don't think that I should be allowed to talk about it because I don't give a shit. I hate animation. I don't want to watch the rest of it, and I don't care. If this had been live action, I would have been like, oh my God, the fucking Underworld, shit. It's not though, and I hate it. And I hate that you make me watch it. And I hate that you make me talk about it.
I'm 100% with Jude on this one. He-Man is not a hill that I am willing to die on at all.
Yeah.
First, 100%. You go, girl.
I kind of feel bad for Kadish now. He's like, this is my childhood. You're all like, I don't fucking care.
He-Man was dumb.
He-Man was dumb. I'm not going to argue that.
Okay, but I do think that I don't care about the names of villains. I feel like everyone has a stupid name. They were
Evelyn?
Evelyn. I love
Merman.
that name. Like the fucking Penguin. Is that a badass name? No, but you buy it. Scareglow. Who gives a shit? He's bad. Okay. Is Batman a great name? No, but he's a great character.
Well,
so who cares?
Whoa, you need to slow your roll a little bit. Making fun of Batman.
How
Come on.
dare I?
How dare you?
I think it's important to point out that, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, the cartoon, it was basically like a half-hour commercial to sell toys.
Yep.
Yeah, that guy's name is He-Man. Settle down.
Yeah.
See, that's kind of the thing with all the 80s cartoons though, right, Matt? They were all half-hour commercials.
Yeah.
G.I. Joe, Transformers,
for sure.
He-Man, She-Ra.
I was a Rainbow Bright girl.
Yeah, Care Bears, all of them. They were here. Go buy our toys. This is what they look like.
Yeah.
And we're going to put the least amount of effort possible into making these things so we can put them out every week. And
I had
it was
all
they
them
were
My
bad.
Little Ponies.
Yeah.
So it's kind of weird to get into these kind of pedantic arguments about, Kevin Smith doesn't have originality and blah, blah, blah,
Mhm.
where, they're actually bringing some sophistication to the story. Whereas originally these were just meant to be like things to sell toys to kids. So it's hard to kind of like Vader said, like die on this hill in the sense that like there really isn't any real true value to arguing about He-Man
No.
because it never had any real integrity to begin with.
Right.
So a lot of these criticisms directed at the show are just kind of like, I mean, it was a commercial, so who cares? But at the same time, those of us who grew up with them and have like a special place in our hearts for this property, it's kind of like, well, we want it to be done right and handled with care.
I just
So,
want it to be done.
It's not like this is Scooby-Doo or something cool,
Yeah.
So
All right, let's go to heaven. Let's go to
all
heaven
right,
next.
so the final episode in the first half of this season is called The Forge at the Forest of Forever. It's episode 5. And basically Teela's group makes it into heaven and they're reunited with Prince Adam, who is there with all the former champions of Eternia. And basically they are there to reforge the Sword of Power and return magic to Eternia. And in this episode, we get to meet King Grayskull, who was the first champion of Eternia, who's voiced by Dennis Haysbert. And there was some controversy here because he was race swapped, changed from a white guy to a black guy. And in the lore, I guess, like they don't really touch on this in this episode, but in the lore, King Grayskull is the first king of Eternia. And so Adam can trace his lineage directly back to him. So it's kind of like, well, if he's black and Adam's like as white as they come, how does that work? But it's also funny because Adam's mom is an astronaut from the planet Earth. So, I mean, it's kind of like she crash landed on Eternia and married the king and had
Sounds
Adam.
good.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you really want to get into the weeds on this stuff, it's kind of like nothing makes sense. But I thought one of the more interesting aspects of this episode was that Roboto, who is the robotic version of Man-at-Arms, he reforges the Sword of Power. He combines the two different aspects of the sword, and he sacrifices his life in in doing that. And I'd never really cared about Roboto all that much. Like he was kind of like just a throwaway character. But this episode, when he's dying, like I was kind of getting choked up at it. Like I felt like this is the first character to actually truly die on this show. And it was a very poignant death, I thought, because like, he's talking about how like, I'm actually scared. And, that means that I'm not a robot because I feel this fear. And he was actually happy that he felt the fear of death kind of coming upon him. And it was kind of like a weird, poignant moment in a kid's cartoon. What did you guys think of that?
I agree with you. I think the Roboto thing was cool. I like that he was the one who was able to forge the sword back together, and he used his, arc technology power system to do it with. They used the temple as like some kind of a conduit. They turned the entire place into a forge. That aspect of this episode was really good, but as a whole, this is my least favorite episode of the whole season. It drove me up a wall when I don't know if you want to get into it yet. Did you have anything else you want to talk about Roboto about?
Not Roboto, but there was a scene between Adam and Teela that I wanted to touch on.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to talk about. So for me, coming in fresh, again, I'm going to say that a million times. When Teela shows up and she sees Adam, and it's Adam, it's not He-Man. So he's in Valhalla, basically. He's in heaven. He's in the warrior's heaven. And all the other dudes are their champion versions of themselves because you're in heaven and you're the champion and you died as a champion.
And you can
passed
choose your
torch.
form.
Yeah, you can choose your form. And he's like, he's the only one who chose his lesser form. And I was like, come on, bro. Why you got to make He-Man freaking little boy version in heaven,
right.
in Valhalla? And then not only that, but like when they're doing the whole hunt and they're chasing down the saber-tooth tiger thing or something. There's a Triceratops in this episode, so extra points for that. When they're chasing him down, and Teela is the one who's like doing flips on these little surfboard things that they have. And then He-Man is just a bumbling idiot, falls a couple of times, ends up in the mud. And everybody's like, oh, ha, 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 what a loser. Ha, ha. And I'm like, come on, man. How, like, do you really have to beat the character down? He's in heaven and you're treating him like shit and you're making fun of him in a meta version. Not the characters themselves in the show did make fun of him a little bit, but it was more of like a friendly banter. But just the show itself, as like from the outside looking in, I was like, why are we degrading this character to be like the lesser version and the goofy version? And the conversation that he had with Teela about why he lied, and he's like, I died, and he's like, yeah, and I had to live with it. It was just like, oh my god, dude, it was so cringy, and she was just such a spoiled little brat in this episode. I had no good feelings towards Teela by this point. I was like, whatever, I don't like her, she's annoying.
I'm gonna have to disagree with you on this, Alex, because the whole thing about Prince Adam is that Prince Adam was the one who had the kind of like moral center and the character, the strength of character. He's basically like Steve Rogers in Captain America, where, he was chosen to be Eternia's champion because of the strength of his character and the content of his character. Mm-hmm. And so him choosing his, according to the other champions, lesser self to be in heaven, he was just choosing to be who he truly was, which was Prince Adam. He was never truly He-Man. He-Man was the form that he would take when he needed the physical strength to fight the battles. But the thing that always made He-Man special was the fact that he had this strong moral center as Prince Adam. And if you look at the original cartoon, Prince Adam, because he was quote unquote weaker, and they toned him down because in the original cartoon he looked like He-Man but in like purple spandex. But in the cartoon they actually made him like look frail and little. Which I could appreciate. And in the original cartoon, people were always kind of making fun of him and underestimating him and stuff like that because he kind of played up the fact that he was a klutz, that he was scared, that he wasn't strong, and stuff like that. He needed protectors. So the way I looked at how he was being treated by the other champions, his predecessors, it was more that, they were kind of like just being good natured, kind of ribbing him, but they were basically treating him like he'd always been treated by those around him. So I didn't look at it like they were like, kind of denigrating He-Man. They were just treating Prince Adam as he'd always been treated. And Prince Adam chose that lesser form because that's who he truly was. Like he wasn't like the big muscular He-Man. That was just something that he temporarily transformed into when he needed to, but he was always Prince Adam. So to me, that criticism, is a little bit hollow because like I don't feel it's representative of what the character was. The thing I will agree with you on though is when he had that conversation with Teela and she was like, kind of complaining that he died and stuff like that. It did feel more like that last kind of 5 minutes of the first episode where she was making it all about her. And it would have been more interesting if, they had kind of reconciled a little bit where she was like, I was in love with He-Man. Turns out He-Man was you. And I feel like betrayed and I'm all confused and stuff like that. But getting back to this episode, the end of it is the big thing where basically Adam gives up his reward in the afterlife to go back with Teela in order to return magic to the universe. And when they get back into Castle Grayskull, He-Man calls down the power of Grayskull with the Sword of Power. And right before he's able to transform, Skeletor shows up out of nowhere and freaking runs him through with a spear. And it's meant to be like this, oh God, holy cow moment. And it looks like Adam's dead, and Skeletor kind of reclaims the power or the Sword of Power and becomes Skelegod because he claims the power of Grayskull for himself. And we're left on this big cliffhanger where basically it looks like Skeletor has won. And Adam's dead, He-Man's dead, and Teela and her little crew have been betrayed by Evil Lyn. And things don't look good for our heroes. And this is the classic kind of like midpoint reversal in a good structured story where at the midpoint of every story, and this is episode 5 out of a 10 episode season, the bad guys do something that really hurt the good guys and put them on their back foot. And so going forward, the good guys have many more obstacles to overcome in order to, win the day, basically.
I'll say at this point in time where they get back to Castle Grayskull, there's one moment that I literally laughed out loud and not in a good way. So we get this whole story about how He-Man's going to give up his place in heaven to come back to Earth so that he can become the protector again. He can be the champion and bring magic back to Eternia. Like, it's a big hero thing. Like, I'm going to do what I need to do, sacrifice myself again and do what needs to be done to help other people. I thought it was a great hero motivation for him. I'm like, okay, cool. So he does this. They get into the real world, and they got the crew and everybody's there, and everybody's like, okay, cool, we did it. We got He-Man back. We got the sword back. We're going to fix things. And the sorceress looks at the whole group and says, you did well. The camera's focused right on Prince Adam, and the sorceress says, you did well. And then it pauses, and it goes, Teela, and the camera shifts to Teela, and it's like, oh my God, dude. Like, I laughed so hard. It was just like, how much more can you make it about Teela and like just totally shit on He-Man the whole time? Yeah. Like, that was all I saw. And maybe I'm wrong. I'm sure you're going to argue with me about that. But like, when I saw that, I was just like, oh my God, it was so blatant. Like, we don't care about He-Man's sacrifice. We're talking about Teela. And I was just like, oh my God, here we go again. It was cringy. I thought it was really poorly done. And it was like over the top blunt about it. That's just how I felt at the time. I'd like to hear your argument if you have one, Kadish, because I am curious what you think about that.
Well, I mean, Teela brought back the Sword of Power and Grayskull's champion all at the same time, so she did do a good job.
why the camera shift? Why the obvious like dig at He-Man on that? Like, good job. Pause. Camera shift. Teela. I don't, like, why subvert our expectations like that?
Yeah, I don't know if it was a dig at He-Man so much as it was just like a kind of misdirection for like a little throwaway joke. To me, the bigger issue is that Skeletor's evil plan for once actually worked, and it appears that he won. And the interesting thing about He-Man is that, in the series growing up, every episode was self-contained. So by the time the next episode came around, everything from the previous episode was just didn't matter. In this show, episode to episode, things matter and things carry over. And I know Kevin Smith has come out publicly and said that in episodes 6 and 7, you get 2 very big, brutal fights between He-Man and Skeletor. So I don't think Prince Adam's dead. I think that there's a lot more to come, and I'll be interested to see how they kind of take this show, like what direction they take the show in, because I'm hoping that the final 5 will be much more He-Man centric than Teela-centric. I'm hoping that these 5 episodes kind of got Teela's journey out of the way so that we can now focus on He-Man, and the relationship between Teela and He-Man going forward is they need each other in order to defeat Skeletor. I could see that happening.
We can hope so.
I agree. I hope for that same thing. And I'd be curious. I'm very skeptical to see if they will actually reverse the focus of the show and kind of like redeem He-Man and make him the hero that we've been expecting him to be, I guess, when I kind of like first started watching the show. I don't have a lot of faith in that, though, honestly. With what we've seen, in my opinion, with what we've seen, although on paper the story makes sense and it follows the hero's journey, the messaging to me points us in a direction that I think the next 5 episodes are probably going to be more of the same. We might get a little bit more He-Man, but I think it's going to be Teela from start to finish. I hope I'm wrong. I'd be happy to see He-Man take over and be the champion again, and Teela be the Sorcerer Supreme and, you know, the protector of Grayskull. Like, I'm down if everybody has a happy ending. That's great, but I at this point, I don't know if I can trust it.
I don't trust it either. I'm with you, Alex. I don't really see great things coming out of this show. Maybe I don't know, but like we said earlier, it doesn't have He-Man in the title. It's the Masters of the Universe, right? Which, you know, should tell you something. I'm looking forward to the sequel, Evelyn in the search for the perfect ham sandwich. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Well, I'll say this. So the Masters of the Universe movie from 1987, I believe, was so bad and so insulting to the cartoon series. Like, I can remember seeing that in the theater for my 9th birthday and just being like, this isn't He-Man. This is awful. So like, that to me was a far greater kind of like nose snub at the franchise as a whole than this was.
Well, can we watch it someday on like our most hated movies ever episode or something?
Now.
I'd actually like to get Arthur Borman back.
I was just going to say, yeah,
because he was a production assistant on that show, and he had a lot of great kind of inside baseball stories to tell us about the making of that movie when we had him on, when we interviewed him.
Great minds. Yeah, great minds, Kiddish.
But I want to kind of go around the table and get some final thoughts on this and predictions for the final 5 episodes. And again, it's hard to judge a show just based off of half, because this is basically like half of a movie that we've just watched. And it's hard to give it a fair judgment just based off of like getting to the midway point. I really think Netflix messed up by not releasing all the episodes at once. So Jude, my dear, what are your final thoughts on Masters of the Universe Revelation, and what do you think is going to happen going forward?
I don't give a shit, and I think if you're going to make me watch it, and I know you're going to make me watch it, I will be hate watching it because I hate animated shows, and also I don't care. So
we love you, Jude.
Thanks.
Poor Kiddish.
All right, Alex.
Okay, for me, I will say, again, as somebody who's not a fan of this franchise, going in blank slate, if I wasn't doing the podcast, if I was just going off of this, like, I watched the first 5 episodes, I would not be interested in watching the second half. There's nothing that really sucked me into the universe that would make me be like, I have to see what happens next. I'd be like, whatever. It's not made for me. I am very happy that the person who this is made for, Mr. Kadish over there, likes the show. That thrills me. I know you're kind of alone in that as far as our circle of influence goes, but I appreciate that you do like it and that you're arguing for its cause and that you're hopeful for the next 5 episodes. That makes me happy. My prediction for the next 5 is it's going to be more Teela-centric. I think He-Man is definitely going to be a side character. If they do bring him back to life again, or if he heals up and becomes the champion again, I think that's going to be like a B plot. And the A plot is going to be Teela becoming the guardian of Grayskull. And it's going to be about her reversal from being anti-magic and hating all things magic to becoming who she was meant to be. And she becomes the most powerful magic user in the universe. Like, I think that's where the show's going to go 100%.
Yes.
I just learned that Dolph Lundgren played He-Man in the Masters of the Universe movie.
Yeah.
And I'm more interested in that than the rest of this show.
And Frank Langella played Skeletor.
Yeah.
I can't wait to talk. We do need to get Arthur Borman back on the pod, and we need to talk about that movie.
Yeah. All right, Vader, what are your final thoughts, and what are your predictions for the final 5 episodes?
My final thought, I'm kind of in there with Jude right now. It's like, whatever. It's just like I'm really hoping and rooting for Beastman. I hope he gets his I hope he gets it to get hooked up with Evelyn and they make some puppies down the road. That would be really cool. And That's all I want to see. I want to see some Evelyn Beastman pups.
You want to see some furry porn?
Yeah, whatever. Poor Beastman. I felt sorry for Beastman. He just has one thing. He just wants Evelyn's love. That's all he wants.
And he's constantly friend zoned.
Yeah, he's just I get it. I understand his pain. You know, all of these bad guys out there, they're just poor little dudes who just want to be good.
Poor Evelyn. Her choice is either like a beast man or a guy with a skull for a face.
Well, she could go merman, and they could have some little
tough in the underworld.
What? That's speaking of. What was with that line where Skeletor was like, "Look at this face, my dear. This has given me a life of loneliness." I'm like, what? You're a freaking super villain, dude.
I know, right?
It was so cringy.
I think that line in particular, it wasn't so much, it was like I could never get a woman to love me. It was more like people feared me, so I became what they expected of me type thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Plastic surgery really wasn't on the up and up when this was made.
Well, also, like, Vader mentioned it earlier that Mark Hamill, he's just doing the Joker his evil voice is the same for every character.
Yeah.
It's the Joker voice.
Yeah.
It was the same in the reboot of the Dark Crystal and stuff like that. So it is kind of funny, like watching Skeletor with Joker's voice coming out of it. But
it's not. I find it off-putting. It's weird. I didn't like it at all.
I very much know it's Mark Hamill. Like when you go for voice actors, like when we talked about Invincible, we very much know that J.K. Simmons is Omni-Man. Like there's certain characters,
but they made Omni-Man to look exactly like J.K. Simmons.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
so it fits.
It's just funny to me when voice actors, like super famous A-list actors, go into voice acting, and you're like, it's them.
Right.
There's no acting involved. It's just them reading lines.
Yeah, I'll say this though: Liam Cunningham as Man-at-Arms nailed it.
Yeah.
Perfect choice for that.
He was the best of the show as far as the voice actors, I think.
I actually think the guy they got to play Orko
I was just
really
gonna say
good.
that. Yeah. I didn't hate Orko.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
it's kind of funny because Orko in the cartoon, he was always someone that everyone who watched the cartoon was annoyed with. And they actually made you like Orko in this show. And again, I kind of point to that as
That was Kevin Smith's plan all along.
Well, I think it was. I point to it as like an example of like how good the writing is on this show, is because like you come to care for these characters that in previous incarnations you just didn't give a crap about. So like as I was watching it, I came to care more about Evil Lyn. I came to care more about Orko and Man-at-Arms and like all these kind of like ensemble side characters that never really got fleshed out in the original series all that much. But in this series, like I felt like I got to know them a lot better than I had previously. So I appreciated that. So overall, I guess I am alone in this. Like I enjoyed this
You're dying
show.
on this hill.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm not.
You are dying on it.
Like I understand everyone's criticisms, and if people didn't like this, like I can totally see why they didn't like it. So I'm not going to tell them that they're wrong for not liking it or that their criticisms are inaccurate. I am going to say that me personally, I enjoyed this show. I think that Kevin Smith has a plan. I'm impressed with what the writers were able to do. And I really wish that we could have watched the entire thing so that we could give it a proper judgment. But I'm looking forward to the final 5.
Okay. All right, guys, that's our discussion on Masters of the Universe Revelations. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Are you with Kadish? Did you enjoy this? Are you looking forward to the next 5? Or are you with the rest of us crazy, salty nerds who just think this is just a bunch of Hollywood woke crap?
At the bottom of our hill with pitchforks.
You will never. No. Like I said, like, subscribe, share with your friends, comment, let us know what you thought. Before we get out of here, Mr. Matt Vader, where can they find you on the socials?
You can find me at Matt Vader 74 on all of these social medias, mostly Twitter though, and Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, some, and on our Discord channel. I've been hanging out there a lot more lately, and it's a lot of fun. We've been getting new people there a lot, and come join us there at saltynerddiscord.com. Open invitation. So,
and Miss Jude, where can they find you at?
You can find me at I am Jude Juju on Instagram, on Twitter, and TikTok. And you can check out my webpage at thevoiceofjude.com and check out my voiceover work. Speaking of voiceovers.
And Mr. Kadish, where can they find you at?
You can find me at Matthew Kadish, Kadish on Twitter and Gitter. And you can also check out my books on Amazon by going to kadishbooks.com.
And I'm your host, the Salty Nerd. You guys can catch me on our Discord channel along with Matt Vader down there, saltynerddiscord.com. We'll be there hanging out. We do a lot of fun stuff. Come join the rest of the crew. All right, everybody. You guys have a great day and stay salty, my friends.